This happened many years ago, but due to obvious reasons, it will always feel like it happened yesterday. When I was about 12 years old, my family up and moved where we had rooted ourselves for as long as I can remember. And to this day, I still don't fully understand what exactly happened. My parents had lived in our house for about 10 years before I was born, and welcomed my two older siblings into the world before having me. We lived in a really nice neighborhood. We lived in a really reputable school district as well, though my parents constantly seemed on the edge about sending us to a boarding school. Luckily, it didn't happen. We would have received a much better quality of education, but it was too costly for my parents. But I liked my school and my friends, so I was relieved. I loved that house. It was all ours. My family built it, so nobody else had ever lived in it before us. Even up until the day we moved out, everything was in perfect condition. My sisters and I all had our own bedrooms. There were two full bathrooms, an enclosed patio, and a connected garage, and a downstairs area comfortable enough to have guests over. We had two pets, a dog and a cat. They were about as typical as you'd think. Boris, our dog, was a hyperactive ball of love who refused to leave anyone alone. He'd always bark at visitors, the mailman, the neighbor kids on their way to the bus stop, squirrels he'd see through the window, etc. He was the most loyal dog anyone could ever find. I remember walking him in the middle of the night while I was 7, and I felt perfectly safe. He'd always get excited to go for walks, and he even demanded it at times. Our cat, Tink, on the other hand, spent most of her time looking out windows and sleeping. She was kind of antisocial, as cats can be, and hid from Boris a lot when he wanted to play and wouldn't take no for an answer. She had gotten outside on more than one occasion, but not for very long. She'd usually get scared, and we'd find her hiding under one of our cars or in a tree. One time, she came back absolutely filthy and we had to bathe her. We never did find out where she had been or how she had gotten so dirty, but she seemed fine. I was really attached to that cat. For some reason, she liked me the most out of everyone in the family. That's probably because I'm an introvert and spend most of my time alone in a quiet room. Boris wasn't allowed in my room, so naturally, when I heard Tink scratching on my door, I figured she knew it was a safe place, so I let her in. Dad wasn't too keen on the idea of getting a cat, but Tink was an excellent hunter, and he always made it known how much he appreciated her pest control skills. She'd catch mice, spiders, ants, even flies. Dad tried to reward her with toys, but she never seemed interested for long. She'd be more interested in a hair tie or a milk jug ring. So we stopped buying her toys. There was no point. One night, I had just finished cleaning my room, and I heard her chirping from under my bed. She sounded very playful. Before cleaning, I had a lot of small items laying around. Hair ties, erasers, crumpled up receipts, and things of the sort. But I had no idea what she was playing with since I had just picked everything up off the floor. I figured it was probably a bug or something. I still had a lot of cleaning to do, so I just let her do her thing while I kept cleaning. A few minutes later, she came out from under my bed carrying something in her mouth. I only caught a glimpse of it since she was walking away from me, but something seemed off, and I immediately closed my bedroom door. I don't know why I closed the door. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had nothing to hide. Still, I worried. I turned back to look at her and noticed what she had in her mouth that turned my world completely upside down forever. A human finger. I was afraid to touch it, but it was very clearly a real human finger. I could see bones sticking out from the middle of it, and dirt under the fingernail. It looked like it belonged to a man. Fortunately, Tink dropped it on the floor and walked away so I could examine it further. There was blood still dripping from it. It was freshly removed, but when? And by who? I couldn't help but wonder how. And most importantly, whose was it? As soon as those thoughts overcame me, I became weak and lightheaded. As my vision started to fade, my body moved itself to my trash can, where I removed my lunch in an extremely unpleasant manner. "Sweetie, are you okay in there?" I heard my mom on the other side of the door. I physically couldn't answer her. I was unable to stop her from entering my room. She knelt down beside me and kept my hair out of my face while I finished, and then told me I looked like I'd seen a ghost. She led me to my bed and told me to get some rest. I was still in shock. I couldn't rest. She came back only a minute later with a glass of water she placed on my nightstand. I told her to close the door, and then sat in silence. I didn't know what to say. I pointed to where Tink had dropped the finger. "Tink had it," I told her. My mom looked at me with the same worried and confused expression I must have had, but she didn't look like she was going to throw up. "The hell?" was all she could spit out. She instructed me to stay in my room. A minute later, she came back with a Ziploc bag filled with water, and wearing gloves she used to pick up the finger off my floor. "No, not the floor," she whined to herself. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, clutching Tink. She never answered me. That night, I could hear my parents talking, but I couldn't make out anything they were saying. I could just hear their voices reverberating throughout the house. Less than a week later, we packed up and left without ever really knowing why. But I know Tink's discovery had something to do with it. And I know my parents knew more than they let on. It's been over a decade, and I still had questions that were left unanswered. When I heard through a high school classmate that our old home was for sale, I couldn't resist the urge to look at it, hoping I'd find some sort of clue as to what happened. When I scheduled a tour with the real estate agent, I pretended to never have lived in the house. She didn't say anything out of the ordinary. Certainly no mention of any deaths. The only observable thing from that tour that I could link to the missing finger was the carpet from my bedroom. It had been ripped out and replaced with a different carpet, but it didn't exactly look new. I remembered my mom commented about the blood being on the floor. 10 years later, and I still couldn't make sense of it. What I found most confusing was that it was fresh, and it didn't come from within the house. Boris would have barked. Evidence would have been on the other floors. I would have heard something. It couldn't have come from outside either, though. The only blood was in my room. And I don't think Tink had gotten outside that whole week. There would have been some kind of trail leading to the outside. It was as if it just magically appeared under my bed. I hadn't heard anything on the police scanner about any violent acts that day, nor were there any suspicious death notices that week. Ever since that happened, I was on the lookout for a man with a missing finger, but never encountered one that matched the appearance of the one Tink found. What bothers me the most about this is the fact that a decade later, I still don't know a damn thing about how it got there. I don't know anything at all. But I do feel something. I feel that my family was involved, though I don't know who specifically, or to what extent, or how, or why. But someone in my family is not what they seem.